Good morning, it's Karen, and today I'm going to be looking back at my top 10 books that I wanted to read in 2021. If you've been following here on my channel, you'll know that I just finished my list. I read 9 of the books in 2021 and finished my final one in 2022. I still call that a win. Last year, I had a baby, and my goal, I wanted to be really relaxed. So I figured I'm going to come up with a list of 10 books that if I don't read anything else, I just want to have read these 10. So I've got my 10 books here, and we're just going to go through them and see how I did with picking my TBR for the year. The first book that I really wanted to tackle was my goal book. This was going to be my tome that I read before I had a baby, and that was Gone with the Wind. This is a chunker, and my silly little self was like, oh, I'll start it in January. I'm due in March, and I'll be able to finish this, no problem. I got 700 pages in, and my baby girl came 5 weeks early. I had 5 weeks to read those 300 pages, and she just was like, you know what, Mom? I'm going to come early, so you're going to have to wait until September to finish those last 300. But you know what? I think that was kind of good because it let me digest a little bit more, and then I got to watch the movie with my husband, and I was a lot more focused on this. If I had tried to read it in those first few months, no way. So Gone with the Wind, I absolutely love it. Regardless about how you feel about the American Civil War and all of that, I think it is an important book to read. The best way that I had heard it described, if you are interested, was that it was already kind of dated when Margaret Mitchell wrote it. So she was sort of living in this nostalgia of the pre-war South. All of those gentlemen and those Southern belles. This is definitely one of those books that kind of sees it through the lens that's a bit rosy. However, it was a very valuable viewpoint to read. And for that, I ended up giving it 5 stars. Next book on my list that I had to read was Senlin Ascends. I have been watching BookTube just die hard for this series, and so I decided I'll go in. I'll try it. We'll see what happens. I was first aware of this book several years ago when I saw it on the shelves, and I thought, this is an amazing cover. It is absolutely amazing. I loved this book. I loved Senlin. I loved his wife and the journey that he had to go on to try and find her. So they are going to this Tower of Babel, for their honeymoon. They've just married and they're getting a little bit of time away with each other. And he loses her and he goes after her. And each level has something different going on. This is, it reads a little bit like Alice in Wonderland in that each section is kind of separate. There is an overall kind of goal, but you're just kind of going and experiencing that one part. So you go in, you experience the first floor. You go in, you experience the second floor. And you go in, you experience the third floor, etc. The thing that I liked the best about this is there are underlying metaphors and symbolisms that is just, I had so many breakthroughs and so many aha moments while I was reading this. I was talking so excitedly to my husband about this. This is why this one got 5 stars from me, because I just could not stop talking about it, and I kept having those brain sparks that I just went, ah. So I can't wait to get into the second one. I have started it and I struggled, so I'm gonna have to start it again, because I have the third book on my list of 10 for 2022, so I better get on that. The next book that I had on my list was Jade City. And if you know, you know, I just finished this one. This was my very last holdout. As you can also see, I have a little bit of water damage because I spilled water on it. My goodness. Anyway, I really liked this one. I really, really did. However, it took me so long to read this one, I'm really sad about, that I could only give it 3 stars. This is a mafia, kung fu-esque fantasy set on an island, nondescript, kind of like Hong Kong, kind of like Singapore. It is fantastic. There are great family dynamics, and I absolutely loved that. There's a lot of politicking going on, and I would highly recommend it. I do plan on continuing on the series. Next book that I read was The Novels of Charles Williams. I did not technically read this whole thing because each book that he's read is analyzed in this one, and I currently have 2 more books of his that I haven't read yet. So I read all of them that I had read, and my goodness, has an analysis ever made somebody cry? It made me cry. I relived the joy of reading those books and all of the really hard, deep messages that Charles Williams put in, the theology. Thomas Howard really gets Charles Williams. There were so many passages I have underlined and starred so many things in this book. And I have never felt so seen as a reader. Because one of the things of Charles Williams that Thomas Howard goes into is the fact that you think you know what you're reading. You're reading the first chapter and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I got this. 2 chapters in, okay, yeah, it's getting a little bit denser. And then suddenly Charles Williams goes all metaphysical on you and he's going abstract and something's happening and you're not sure if it's actually happening or if it's in somebody's head or if it's sort of the spiritual realm merging with the reality. It's just like, yeah, I get it. I get it. So 5 stars for this one. This was great. I'm so happy I have it in my library. Of all the books on my top 10 reading list, this was the biggest disappointment, and that was Bandersnatch, C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and the creative collaboration of the Inklings. Charles Williams is one of the Inklings, and that is how I got into him, was I thought, I really want to read what other Inkling works there are out there, so I picked up Charles Williams on a whim. This book also has illustrations by James A. Owen. He wrote a series that I did really like. I think it started with Here Be Dragons, and I really liked it. I really liked the first book. I really enjoy all of his different portraits of each of the persons involved. So it's anyone from between J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, but also Charles Williams and Owen Barfield, and also Hugo Dyson. So I was really disappointed with this one. There was some hints, some beautiful hints of glorious insight and writing into each of these characters. The thing that I struggled with, and this is a pet peeve of mine that I have in nonfiction, is you get about halfway through and you start noticing some repetition. And the same stories are kind of being recycled and they're being told over and over and over, and almost as if you could read this chapter just on its own and not the whole book. You could read this one and be totally fine. I just did not appreciate the fact that it felt like the author did not have enough material. I could not handle the repetition, and for that I could only give this 3 stars. I also had my highly anticipated A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This was going to be just sort of a fluff book that I was going to read in the year. And I will admit, I did read most of this in the middle of the night. If you've ever had a baby and you know about nursing and waking up in the middle of the night, this was something that I could read and it was pretty brainless for me to get through. I felt like this was a fun one. This was a have a good time, not a long time. It's been a year since I've read it and I don't know if I could tell you a whole lot about it. The jokes out there, oh, you have issues, you know what you should do? You should practice walking up and down the stairs, working out with a hot guy, and just like smacking some swords around, like get out that anger. I don't know. That was like all I really remember. It didn't really stick with me. I gave it 4 stars. Don't know why I gave it 4 stars. But you know what? I'm not going to debate my past self because I think in that moment when I finished reading it, it really brought me something. So 4 stars it is. The next book I read was The Mask Falling, which is the fourth book in the Bone Season series. I'm not sure what the series is actually called. It starts with the Bone Season and then the Mime Order and then a Chorus Rising and then The Mask Falling. The Mime Order is one of my top favorite books of all time. The Bone Season, I absolutely loved. That was also a 5 star. I've read that one twice. Loved it both times. The third one, it was like a lukewarm one for me. This one brought it right back. This was a your feet are never touching the ground kind of a book. You were just running. Paige is a clairvoyant and she is basically on the run from people who want to capture her and use her power. I'm not going to really go too much in detail since this is the fourth book in a series, but I really absolutely loved this one and I felt like Samantha Shannon went back into form for this one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Abrupt change. It is another day. Hairstyle change. Day change. And we're just going to continue the list as if I had never stopped, but obviously I have to address the elephant in the room. The next book that I finished reading was A Choir of Lies by Alexandra Rowland. This was another 5 star. This is the second book in a series, the first one being A Conspiracy of Truths. I absolutely love what this book series is bringing to the table. There is some really deep explorations of storytelling through the eyes of storytellers, through the eyes of receivers, and how stories can be crafted to possibly manipulate what is heard, what is needed to be heard, how storytellers have a responsibility. There are so many deep things discussed that I couldn't begin to write a list. I couldn't begin to completely delve into it without writing a 5,000 word essay. Just tackling all of these issues would be a mammoth undertaking. This is an incredible feat of craftsmanship, and I will continue to keep looking out for stuff that Alexandra writes because I really like the writing style. The second last book that I had on my list was, in fact, one for my music book club that I'm in, the Musetta Stone Book Club, and that was The Conductor by Sarah Quigley. This one is following Shostakovich and a number of other people during the siege of Leningrad. It was so profound in the way that it explored, through the eyes of musicians, how war can really debilitate a person's creativity and humanness, really. Shostakovich was sort of hired by the government and forced to create things in an attempt to be nationalistic, and he did not necessarily agree. And all you have to do is listen to, I think it's his Symphony Number 7, to actually understand that. I think there is a march in there which traditionally would be played with the military arriving in grandeur, but the march is sort of disjointed and it has a lot of dissonance and there's sort of crunchiness going on there, and you understand. All you do is have a listen and you understand that Shostakovich did not agree with the war that was happening. So in this, there is the main orchestra that plays for Russia and kind of brings up morale. They have been evacuated from Leningrad, and so this sort of secondary orchestra is created, and Shostakovich is meant to sort of write for it. We follow Karl Eliasberg, the conductor of this sort of ragtag group of musicians who have been forced to come together to play Shostakovich's Symphony Number 7 for the people of Leningrad to bring up morale. The one image that really struck with me in this one was the idea of the chairs slowly emptying. You know, you practice every single day, you expect to see your fellow musicians, and slowly those chairs are emptier and emptier. So and so doesn't show up. So and so doesn't show up. It's because there was starvation. Because it was a siege, they were literally cut off. So they didn't have anything in the city. The author does such a good job of showing the hopefulness and then that sort of gradual eating away of it, and how the musicians continue to try and move on, and how their families are affected by this perseverance, this need to perform when they are barely holding on. This is a very stark book. It is a very hard book to read. So prepare yourself if you would like to read it. But this one is incredible. Another 5 stars. The last book that I read, I borrowed from my aunt, so I don't actually have it here, and that's Illuminations by Mary Surratt. This was another book that I picked for the book club. This takes place in the 11th century, I think. We follow Hildegard from childhood when she is chosen to be a companion for another woman who has decided to become an anchoress. An anchoress is a person, usually a woman, who decides that they are going to devote themselves and attach themselves to a church, and attach themselves almost literally in that they build an extra room onto the church and seal it up. And the only way that she can get in and out is through a door, which is sealed. And the monks who are in the main part of the church, who are free to come and go, give her food through a hole in the door. There is a little courtyard that leads to the outside, but that is also blocked off. So essentially, she is closing herself from the world. And we have this 7-year-old being chosen and being told that it is an honor to go and be in that environment. And it's sort of the consequence of our parents kind of telling us what to do and then growing with it and kind of being in circumstances that we wouldn't choose for ourselves. And this is just an incredible exploration. The reason why I absolutely love Hildegard was, to me, she was composer, she was botanist, so she was really interested in plants, which I have an affinity towards, the music and the plants. She gathers plants and seeds and she grows them and she makes medicines, and she sort of garners attention from the folks around. They come to the church, they come to her for herbal remedies. She makes her impact that way. The reason why this book ended up giving me a 5 stars not only was because it followed Hildegard, but the writing is incredible. It is poetic in some parts. I had to read and reread sentences. On a more personal note, I started reading this in the hospital after I had given birth. I was there for 6 days and I was feeling a little bit out of sorts, but what always brings me back is a book. I was able to have small, quiet moments reading this book at a really transformative part of my life. And I think it is really important to acknowledge that when we read certain books, they come to us at the perfect time. And sometimes it will change how we feel about a book. And this one, to me, just struck a chord because it was such an important part of my life. And Hildegard has always been really inspiring to me. So I was really pleased to get into that. Of my top 10 books to read in 2021, 6 of them were 5-star, 2 of them were 3-star, and 2 of them were 4-star. And I think that is pretty amazing. Thank you so much for watching this big wrap up for 2021. I hope that next year I can continue this with another big successful wrap up for 2022. I post every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Bye.